Bob Wankel. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as we take a look at the Phillies now. They told us they weren't going to spend. Then they got JT. Now they got Didi back. What is next? Before, Bob, we were wondering if they were going to spend anything. Now they're overspending, it seems like. How are you, pal?
Hey, what's up, guys? How we doing?
We're all good.
I'll tell you what, a little bit of a change of events here. You know, they've certainly, I guess, pleasantly surprised a lot of people here over the last week or so. When you look at it, I mean, the thing that kind of jumps out at you is that, I think that they were aggressive and they did what they needed to do. But I think in both the cases of Didi Gregorius and JT Realmuto, the market kind of fell back to them a little bit and they were able to pounce. You know, if those guys would have gone out and gotten top dollar elsewhere, I don't know that the Phillies would have matched it. But nonetheless, here we are. They've got these two guys back in the fold. And, you know, I think that you look at the NL East, and we've talked about it a number of times and how good the division is. But I will say this, you know, if you're looking for reasons for optimism at this point, and I think that we all are, as we sit here in the middle of a snowstorm in the Philadelphia region, you know, the Phillies last year were, I believe, tied for fifth in Major League Baseball in runs scored and had the seventh best team OPS. And these guys were a key part of that success offensively. And so to bring these two back, you have a formidable lineup here, and it's a good starting point. But I think we'd all agree that they still have some work to do if they want to make themselves a legitimate contender.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, Bob, I would ask you, and look, they last year would say we had a historically bad bullpen. We're bringing back that offense you just talked about. The starting rotation it wasn't awful last year. But if we had this bullpen fix, we probably would have made the playoffs last year. Is that a good enough recipe to be excited about this team?
Yeah, I don't know that regression to a mean, you know, positive regression in this case to a mean is enough to really say, hey, we're going to be competitive in a division featuring the Braves, this revamped Mets team, and what's still a really solid Washington Nationals team that I think had a little bit of a hangover last season. So, no, I don't think that's enough. Now, obviously, they go out and they bring in Archie Bradley, and that's all fine and well. You know, for me, though, I think that there's three different things that they can do to improve this team, or really four different things. And the first is probably something that we're not going to talk a ton about at this point because it kind of gets overlooked, but it's the bench. I mean, they're still one or two bench pieces away. Dave Dombrowski this afternoon during the Realmuto press conference had mentioned that that's a priority of theirs, and so I expect them to bring in a guy, you know, to maybe solidify the bench a little bit. But then the more obvious things are, if you're going to go out there with a Vince Velasquez as your fifth starter, I truly don't believe that that's good enough. So then, to me, you have to, if you're not going to add there, then I would consider, you know, bringing in another outfielder, a guy that has some versatility, that has a little bit of pop. You know, and I think that that's maybe a way that you can compensate for some of your deficiencies or at least uncertainty in the back end of your starting rotation. And then the other thing, and I think is really important, is that there's still, I believe, one middle reliever away, at least, from really putting together a competent bullpen. I really would like to see them go out and add one more guy. And the guy that I've kind of been stumping for is Trevor Rosenthal, who, you know, I think I might have brought him up a couple weeks ago. He bombed out of baseball. It looked like he was done after the 2019 season. He takes almost nothing to sign with Kansas City at the start of last season. Has a really good year, goes to San Diego, and is awesome for them down the stretch. Just having one more power arm that you can go to in the 6th, 7th, 8th inning, I think would be huge for this team.
You mentioned Velasquez. They signed Matt Moore, who, you know, had success before and then had success in Japan. What do you think his role is going to be?
Well, I mean, they gave him a decent contract there. So, I mean, certainly he's going to be in the mix. You know, my thing with him is that obviously there's talent there, and he was a former All-Star a number of years ago. He had serious injury issues, battled a couple different injuries in recent years, goes overseas last year and was good. And the reports are promising, and maybe he is that guy. Maybe he is that fifth starter. You know, perhaps there's a little bit more upside there than a guy like, Cole Hamels. I know a lot of people in this area would like to see that reunion. I don't foresee that. But, you know, short of going out and getting a guy with a higher ceiling like a James Paxton, who had a lot of success with the Mariners, and then that first year in New York, he had a really bad year last year, had a couple injury issues, was pretty ineffective. So, you know, short of going out and getting a guy like that, I mean, sure. I mean, maybe that move there is something that will help solidify that rotation. I think really, though, it's going to be more of an open competition. And one of those guys would probably end up in the bullpen. I would expect both of those arms, though, to be on this roster come opening day.
Bob, how important was the addition of Dombrowski to get this Realmuto deal done?
Yeah, I don't think it can be understated. I know that there's some people out there that are giving Matt Klentak a lot of credit for kind of waiting out the market, and the Phillies for not, jumping at $170 million over 5 or 6 years for JT Realmuto last summer, early fall. And, there may be something to that, but at the same time, I mean, it just did not look like there was any momentum whatsoever towards a deal here at the end of the season and really through the early part of this offseason. And, it was said today, JT Realmuto mentioned it during his press conference. He said, we didn't really hear anything up until he had a meeting with Dombrowski. It was reported previously right before Christmas, and both Dombrowski and his wife met with JT Realmuto and his wife. And he said at that point, that's when I finally kind of became confident that the Phillies would be a destination, or that we might be able to get this done. But up until that point, it didn't sound like he was very confident. And so when the fans were all freaking out, and everyone said like, oh my God, are they going to let this guy walk? I think that those concerns were legitimate in hindsight. So yeah, I think Dave Dombrowski coming in and kind of resetting the situation was important in terms of momentum getting this deal done.
As you alluded to, JT did speak today. Did anything else stand out to you from what he had to say?
No, I mean, I think that the things that you'll read about are that, Bryce Harper was amped up after the signing and texted him, let's go, with a bunch of exclamation points. And that's fun and all, I guess. That he appreciates the support from his teammates and the fan base and all those things that you would expect to hear him say. I think really the biggest takeaway from the entire session was what Dombrowski said, which is that we're not done. We know we have some things that we need to do. And I think that if you're a Phillies fan, you should be excited in hearing that message, not just that, oh, hey, we went out, we got the shortstop, we brought back the catcher, and that's the best we're going to do for right now. I mean, there was a clear acknowledgement that he knows that they can add to this bullpen and that they can add to the bench, and I don't know that it's going to be some blockbuster signing, but, I think that Dave Dombrowski has, I would call it creativity. I think that he has the creativity to go out and take advantage of a market that might be a little bit soft right now and maybe steal a guy that has some upside. And so I don't think the Phillies are done between now and spring training, whenever spring training might actually be. When pitchers and catchers get down there, it could be a couple of weeks, or they could be on a delay here, depending on how the labor negotiations, play out. But yeah, I mean, I think that was the main takeaway for me. Not so much that JT Realmuto's back; that's all fine and well. But I think this team's still going to make some moves here.
Yeah, and that would be very interesting to see if they can add some bullpen pieces, and then maybe get some people more interested and get them excited, because they brought Didi back, which means they're going to have essentially the same everyday lineup, right? I mean, you see any changes coming to that everyday lineup at all?
No, as of right now, you really can't. I mean, Alex Boehm, I think, you can overlook the impact of having him for a full season, assuming he stays healthy and assuming that he doesn't seem to do what every other athlete in the city does, which is take a step back after a breakout rookie year, So, I mean, as long as he stays on track, you get a full season of Boehm. I mean, that's the one difference. There's an upgrade there and potentially a substantial upgrade. But no, I mean, in terms of what they finished the season with, prior to Rhys Hoskins getting hurt, prior to Realmuto getting banged up with the hip injury at the end of last season, it's widely the same lineup. And there is a hole out there in center field, in my opinion. Whether that ends up getting filled by, Scott Kingery, Roman Quinn, Adam Hazley, like they need one of those guys to kind of take charge and really have a breakout year. And I would tell you that there's some potential in all three of them, but I don't think you can feel overly confident that any one of them is going to put it together and finally reach that peak that we were hoping to see from, especially Kingery, in my opinion. He's the one guy that would really provide a jolt if he could even slightly resemble something which we expected when he first came up.
Well, and Bob, remember, there's no DH too, so somebody's going to be out of the lineup this year instead of just moving from out of the lineup to DH, which means, last year McCutchen played, it was the DH a lot. You could move Hoskins to the DH or Boehm or, one of those guys seemingly will be out of the lineup now.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be pretty creative. I mean, they're going to have to be creative. I could see a lot of situations where Andrew McCutchen might be out of the game after the 6th, 7th inning if they're leading. If you go back to like 07, 08 with Pat Burrell out in left field, and I don't want to diminish Andrew McCutchen's defensive capabilities, but I just look at a 34-year-old who's coming off the injury that he's coming off of. I know he's an extra year out, but he's not going to have the same gear that he used to have. So I just wonder if it's a situation where they take him off his feet after the 6th, 7th inning and they get guys in as defensive replacements out in left field. I could certainly see that. But, yeah, I mean, that's going to hurt. If they don't have the DH, I know that every team can look at their personnel and say, hey, we'd be better served if we had more flexibility. But it especially hurts this Phillies roster.
What do you think is a fair expectation for Zach Eflin?
Let's say he makes 30 starts. I mean, I'll give you a stat line that I'd be pleased with. An ERA somewhere in the mid to high threes, I think is what he can do. Guy that I think can go out and give you a consistent 6 innings, maybe 180 innings over 30 starts. I think that's a reasonable expectation. A guy that's not going to strike out a ton of batters, but maybe strikes out 8 or 9 per
Well, last year he was getting those numbers up. It was a little impressive.
He was, and that's the reason for excitement. I don't know how sustainable that is. I'm not like the guy that's going to cry small sample size. I mean, he pitched enough last year where it was hard not to be impressed with him. And I think what he did was he reverted back to the sinker and using the lower half of the zone, which is what he's comfortable with. But he did not totally abandon, throwing heat up in the zone. And that was a thing that the previous coaching staff was adamant about him doing in order to take the next step. And sometimes he got hurt when he stayed up there too long. But last year he seemed to really get a feel for it for the first time. He stayed relatively healthy, and it looked like he was turning the corner. I mean, I think that he can be a solid number 3 for you. And on this team, I slot him behind a guy like Aaron Nola, a guy like Zach Wheeler, and I think that there's reason for optimism with him. But after Zach Eflin, that's what's tough. Those are 2 huge question marks in that number 4 and number 5 spot.
Yeah, and we don't know when the pitchers and catchers will even get down to Clearwater and start things off. There's some reports over the weekend that they want to push everything back a little bit here, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But Didi is back, JT is back, and the Phillies hopefully have a couple more moves. Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad covers the Philadelphia Phillies, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Bob, thanks so much, man.
We'll talk to you soon.